Good afternoon. On behalf of the Center for Community Progress, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. My name is Julia Zimmerman, and I serve as the Program Officer for Education, Leadership, and Engagement here at Community Progress. I'm coming to you from Washington, D.C., and I encourage you to share your name and where you're signing in from in the chat. Community Progress webinars equip participants with the building blocks to understand and solve tough challenges related to property vacancy, abandonment, and deterioration. For today's webinar, we're joined by Deb Flora, Executive Director of the Mahoning County Land Bank, and Brian Larkin, Director of the National Land Bank Network at the Center for Community Progress. Before turning it over to our speakers, I want to mention that we will allow time at the end of the presentation to answer questions. If you have a question during the presentation, please submit them via the Q&A box below. We will share presentation slides and a video recording of today's presentation in the week following. If you experience any technical difficulties, please send an email to Julia Zimmerman at jzimmerman@communityprogress.org. And with that, I'll turn it over to Deborah. Deborah on the screen. Awesome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here with you today, and I am looking forward to telling you more about Youngstown, which is the city that I have now lived in for more than 30 years. Can someone confirm that you can see the first screen of my PowerPoint? Well, hopefully it's there. I'll keep talking in the meantime. What I want to emphasize today is that I'm going to talk to you about a story that's first and foremost about cooperation and collaboration. Mahoning County Land Bank has existed since 2011.
Sorry, Deb, just wanted to interrupt. We can't see your slides yet.
Okay.
Sorry about that, guys.
To get somebody to help me who's nearby.
They're also saying they're getting a little echo from you. Sorry about that, guys. We'll have everything going in one quick second.
We could overreact to Zoom. I'm not getting that bar. Okay, let me check it. Go ahead. Is that better? Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm sorry about that interruption. I am not the most technically adept person, and I admit it. So, Mahoning County Land Bank has existed since 2011, and I've been the executive director since 2012. I've actually spent my entire career operating out of downtown Youngstown in one form or another. And I want to stress this is a story about collaboration and cooperation. It's the only meaningful way that things get done in a place like this. And I think that's true of most communities where collaboration and cooperation usually rule the day. And so before I tell you a little bit about the project, I want to tell you a little bit more about where I live and work. And now, here we go. For those of you who are not familiar with Youngstown, we're in the northeast corner of the state. Mahoning County, we are sitting right on the edge of Pennsylvania, and I did see a number of people from Pennsylvania signing in today. Hello, neighbors. It's literally a 20-minute drive from Youngstown to be in the state of Pennsylvania. But one of the strategic advantages about us is that we've been known to be halfway between Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and we also are reasonably halfway between Chicago and New York. And so that's been an interesting set of circumstances for this area when you think about transportation and the way that transportation is part of the economy. So we have had some success around using that as a strategic advantage. And I think we have a long way to go yet as far as leveraging our equidistant position in this part of the United States for the greater good here. We are a community that I think a number of you can relate to, in that we have seen our rise and our fall, and are trying to work on yet another rise in population and activity here. It is not a surprise to many of you. You probably, if you hear Youngstown, one of the first associations would be steel, because we were a steel manufacturing powerhouse a long time ago. And you can see what that did in terms of population. You know, we had immigrant settlers coming here for the work opportunities that existed. And so you see how we peaked there, and that was the height of steel production, 1920 to about almost 1960. Our population peaked to coincide with the fact that we were producing steel at such amounts, and really we were probably second only to Pittsburgh in terms of steel production. Black Monday, as we call it here, happened in 1977 when Youngstown Sheet and Tube announced that it was closing its major works here. And we lost, this was tens of thousands of people who had been employed historically at local steel mills. And it was an enormous loss of tens of thousands of jobs in a very short time, a time frame in which we could not absorb it all, and led to decades of disinvestment and poverty and just general despair here. And that's something that we are trying to rebound from. Again, I think a lot of you have had similar circumstances, and so you understand what I'm talking about. In terms of demographics, it's interesting here that there is close to a balance as far as our populations are concerned, especially when you speak of the white and the Black populations. And the Hispanic population here, there's always been a presence because of many family connections to Puerto Rico and Mexico here. And we do see some recent growth in the Hispanic population coming to this area. Again, it's something that we are keeping in mind through our programming. In terms of our culture, there are things that we're very proud of, things that actually trace back to our heyday as a steelmaking area, and things that we are still actively preserving after a long period of time. Mill Creek Metro Parks was the first park district in Ohio that actually dates back to 1891. We have thousands of acres of park property here for recreational purposes, and thousands more acres that are merely being preserved. But the holdings of our Metro Park exceed 5,000 acres. It runs through the city of Youngstown in parts. It touches townships that are nearby, and the park district also has additional holdings that are not contiguous, but are represented elsewhere in Mahoning County. Very lovely area, very significant resource for us. We are the home of the Butler Institute of American Art, the first museum in the United States to be devoted to American art based on the personal collection of Joseph Butler, who made his money in steelmaking, and who launched this. So again, it's a long time cherished institution here with an international reputation for its collections and for its exhibits. Just an absolute treasure in this area. The Youngstown Playhouse just last Saturday had its 100th anniversary celebration at its facility. It is one of the country's oldest continuously operating community theaters, and we are extremely proud of that. We also have our own symphony, the Youngstown Symphony, which in 2026 will celebrate its centennial. Much of these assets were come to us because of philanthropy that was an outgrowth of what we were good at, which was steel production. And we're proud that we still have these assets. So talking about our culture, we're going to do this we're going to run clockwise, and we're going to start with that pizza in the left bottom corner there. That's not just a pizza, that's a Briar Hill pizza. That's Briar, B-R-I-E-R. We are referencing a neighborhood on the north side of Youngstown where many immigrants settled in the early days of steel making, and they would walk down the hill to the Youngstown Sheet and Tube Works to do very long and dirty days of employment. And they had their own backyard gardens. And when it wasn't payday and the kitchen pantry was perhaps a bit meager, Briar Hill Pizza is what fed the citizens of Briar Hill, because they made the dough, they grew the tomatoes and the peppers in their own backyard. They used shaker cheese rather than the mozzarella or the other cheeses that we would use today. It's very rustic. It's vegetarian, to be honest. And when you eat it in Youngstown, it is absolutely delicious. We are known for this, and we are proud of our heritage around Briar Hill Pizza. You can get it in many restaurants here, but if you're going to be here, talk to me first before you order. I'll tell you which ones are actually good. The Good Humor Bar was actually created here in Youngstown by a man named Harry Burt. And so we continue through our historical society to honor the legacy of Harry Burt and what he did to put Youngstown on the map via the Good Humor Bar. The gentleman's picture in the middle will be familiar to some of you anyway. That is Lieutenant Governor Jim Tressel. That is former Ohio State football coach Jim Tressel. That is the man that since 1987 I have been calling coach when he arrived at Youngstown State University, who didn't have a name of his own. He arrived as the son of Lee Tressel, who had been a football coach at Baldwin Wallace near Cleveland for a long time. Coach and I have known each other ever since then, because as a student and as an editor at the student newspaper at Youngstown State, we got to know one another very well. And so we have both come a long way, but certainly he's come a much further way than I have. So Handel's Ice Cream, that might be familiar to some of you because Handel's has a number of franchises now in many places, but this is the birthplace of Handel's Ice Cream. Alice Handel was serving it out of a service station on Market Street when it got started. So if you are eating Handel's ice cream anywhere else, whether it's the Midwest or the West Coast, you're eating good ice cream, but I will tell you, it's better if you eat it from the original location here in Youngstown. Please come and enjoy it. I bet you're wondering why Winnie the Pooh's on there. Because the voice of Winnie the Pooh in recent decades, as well as many, many other animated characters, comes from Jim Cummings, a native of Youngstown. His last name is spelled Cummings. If you want to look him up, you'll be surprised at the depth of his talent and the many, many characters for which he has created a voice in his career. Really creative and talented guy. Proud to call him to your attention. And I'm going to insert one more thing here. If you know the song Celebration by Kool and the Gang, the next time you hear it, I want you to think about Youngstown, because the founders of Kool and the Gang, the Bell brothers, were students of Youngstown City Schools. We're proud of that too. And then finally, the picture in the middle, that is a Youngstown cookie table. Oh yes, Arby's was created here too. Thank you for that question. Yes, the founders of Arby's started a restaurant here in the early 1960s, and so that franchise lives on. Oh, yes, you're going to start asking me about other franchises. We have a lot, right? More so that I can cover in this presentation, but you're making very correct observations in the chat. Thank you for doing that. The Youngstown Cookie Table, though. So again, this is born out of a long time custom here that traces back to the immigrant population and how people came together for wedding receptions to add to sweet treats so that, weddings back then weren't the occasions that they are right now, but certainly the Youngstown Cookie Table is more than an occasion. It is the mark by which wedding receptions are judged for their credibility, I guess I'll say. And to my friends from Pittsburgh who are on this call, I know that there's some tension between us about who gets the credit for creating a cookie table. And I love Pittsburgh sports. My family is from Southwestern Pennsylvania, and I am not here to concede who gets credit. It's ours, okay? We're just going to leave it there. It's a Youngstown cookie table, not a Pittsburgh cookie table. But enough about the jokes. Let me tell you a little bit about challenges and opportunities in our area. I told you that we've been known very well for our steel making, and the next best thing that we've been known for decades would be automobile production. The GM plant in Lordstown was a flagship here. Again, tens of thousands of people were employed at GM, and the spinoff from both steel making and auto making in terms of services and delivery and restaurants and pubs and the whole thing, right? We were so heavily invested in those two industries, and so we suffered greatly when those industries declined and then ceased to exist here in the Mahoning Valley. Those have been very hard times for us, and I have spent my childhood growing up living more with the ramifications of the loss rather than enjoying the benefits of those things. But in recent years, we have hope. I mentioned earlier that I've spent my entire career working out of downtown Youngstown in one form or another. And I tell you, as I sit here today, the level of cooperation between the entities here exceeds anything I've seen in my career. And it is the reason why we are getting any sort of traction around opportunities. So Altium Cells is what took over the GM Lordstown facility. Lordstown, by the way, is technically in our neighboring Trumbull County, but is situated in a way that it is extremely easy to get to from Mahoning County and many other points in Northeast Ohio. Altium Cells is a joint venture between General Motors and LG Energy Solution, and they are creating technologically advanced battery cells for GM's future production of electric trucks and SUVs. In a short amount of time, Altium Cells has become the leading employer in Trumbull County with more than 2,400 employees. And that's significant because this is a project that's maybe not even 5 years in the making so far. So we are excited to see the opportunities that are ahead with Altium Cells. Kimberly-Clark has decided and announced in May that they will build their first facility in Ohio, specifically Warren, Ohio, back to Trumbull County, but still part of the Mahoning Valley. Kimberly-Clark is going to be establishing an $800 million advanced manufacturing facility. About 500 quality, higher paying jobs will come with that. And Kimberly-Clark, of course, would be the company that creates personal care and hygiene products that in many ways, Kleenex, Huggies, it's that company. And so it's a very exciting time for us to have Kimberly-Clark actively bringing something very meaningful to our area. The other three logos up there, that's the YSU logo, YBI, and America Makes. Those are all interconnected. So America Makes is the National Additive Manufacturing Innovation Institute, located in downtown Youngstown. It's a partnership between government, academia, and industry to accelerate additive manufacturing. And by that, we're talking about 3D printing, and to do that in the workplace and among the workforce. And so between these three entities, we are working very actively to enhance design flexibility through additive manufacturing, reduce the cost around manufacturing, and streamline production. So America Makes is where a lot of the technology is being developed. YBI is a business incubator, the Youngstown Business Incubator, and they are hosting startup companies that have emerging technology that they just need some space to get started. And so they're using YBI's various buildings downtown to get their feet under them. And Youngstown State University is a partner then in the training of the future workforce and making sure that they are matched well to future manufacturing and being highly technological, more so than we would know today. Now we are going on to the project for today. So I'm actually speaking to you today from the offices of the Economic Action Group, and it is an affiliate of our Western Reserve Port Authority. I am proud, in addition to my work at the Land Bank, to be a member of the board of directors of the Economic Action Group. And EAG exists to support local businesses and neighborhoods in their endeavors. Economic Action Group has loaned itself out many times in support of businesses that perhaps didn't have the greatest grip on how to proceed with a certain grant program, or during the pandemic to even make them aware that there were resources available specifically for businesses like them to survive those dark days of the pandemic. And in neighborhoods, EAG does great work in making sure that there are new assets in neighborhoods, reasons for people to feel pride, reasons for people to want to invest and want to wrap their arms around the places where they live, work, and play. So this is a collaboration between all three of those organizations, as well as the city of Youngstown. The top photo shows you a section of Mahoning Avenue, which starts in downtown Youngstown and goes many miles through Youngstown into neighboring townships. It is one of Youngstown's major corridors, and it is the corridor that Economic Action Group chose to focus on as far as some of its strategies around its commercial revitalization program, CPR. So the top photos show you the state of these two buildings that were in the 1500 block of Mahoning Avenue when we first started a discussion around what could be. Mahoning Avenue, especially when you're talking about it in the city of Youngstown, is heavy on locally owned businesses and light on franchises. And for locally owned businesses, they have their struggles and they need support at times. And we were trying to create new opportunities and continue to create new opportunities along that stretch of Mahoning. The Dave's Auto Parts store had been vacant and unused for some time. The building to the right of it had been unused for an even longer period of time. And what made this particular location especially interesting is that there were a number of empty lots that wrapped around it. You would not be able to see all of it from this picture, but to the left of Dave's Auto Parts, the property started there and then wrapped around the back of it, parallel with a street back there called First Street. It was an intriguing site, and a conversation was launched about, well, is this the example where we could acquire the property perhaps and do some sort of white box treatment to it and bring somebody in who would take it further? The bottom pictures show you what it looks like today, and it's lovely, and I don't want to make it to seem easy that getting from point A to B was simple. It was not. That's the reason that there's a story behind it. So Trek in all its glory right now was just a shell with some leftover auto parts products and chemicals and things of that nature when we first got to see it. And in those early days, EAG and the port and Mahoning County Land Bank were doing a deep dive into property conditions, not only its physical condition, but what was it like financially? What was going on paper? And so what we discovered is that after several changes of ownership, that the current owner did have an open mortgage on the property and had not actively done anything about that. It was delinquent on real estate taxes, and we are talking about both buildings, by the way. And it was just it was stalled. Okay, so we started to unpack what we needed to do to unlock this opportunity. And so there was a conversation with the lender. Could we possibly talk the lender into a release of mortgage? There was a conversation with the owner about the tax delinquency and how would that be resolved. There was some conversation, especially with EAG, wanting to evaluate the building and its viability for renovation as opposed to demolition. It never appeared to be an obvious demo candidate, but there were still more conversations that needed to be had about its own stability. And other people, other entities started to come into the picture, and that included the city of Youngstown. And some of you perhaps can relate to this too, that the city of Youngstown Land Bank and Mahoning County Land Bank are occupying the same space. I think we have a number of communities where there may be a county level land bank, at least in Ohio, but there also are municipal land banks that have existed for a longer period of time. And so there's a shared space type of situation there that often requires some navigation. And the point came where we had a conversation about which land bank should continue to carry this project forward, working with EAG and the Port Authority. And ultimately, it did become the city land bank. It was decided that this was the city's way of showing support and interest in getting someone to invest in this property and to take it even further than what we would do in the course of this project. So at that point, then Mahoning County Land Bank, had done some research, offered what it knew, and stepped aside, and the county land bank took it from there. In a nutshell, everything was arranged so that there was a release of lien by the lender upon the transfer of the property from the current owner to the city of Youngstown. The tax delinquency, the real estate tax delinquency was dealt with, and the property then transferred from the city of Youngstown to the Port Authority so that the renovation work could be undertaken by the port and EAG. So what we got out of that was this wonderful space that we now call Trek. If you're looking at the picture in the upper right corner, you are seeing Mahoning Avenue. And in the distance then would be Mahoning Avenue that would be taking you into downtown Youngstown. And this facility is just across the Mahoning Avenue Bridge, leading into what most people recognize as the West Side. So at that time, and just beyond the red canopy that you would see in that upper right photo, is a restaurant called Casa Ramirez, operated by a wonderful family for more than 3 decades, with great roots in this community. And so that was a nice coupling to have another active restaurant style business. And they weren't competing with one another because Trek is coffee and pastries and tea and things like that. And Casa Ramirez, of course, had Mexican food. Casa Ramirez, unfortunately, is not operating as a daily restaurant anymore. They are doing pop-ups as they explore their menu and are also investing in some other business entities also along the restaurant line. So, but I am still hopeful that the day that Casa Ramirez returns as a full-scale everyday restaurant are not that far away. But what I have to say about Trek is that it has been such a wonderful, it's a shot of caffeine for sure, but for the community, it's such a wonderful asset. Directly across the street from Trek is a largely residential neighborhood, and it snuggles up next to a portion of Mill Creek Metro Park District, a portion that includes a multi-million-dollar garden center and an original garden by the Fellows family that has existed for decades. It is an attraction, not just locally, but I would say nationally in the United States for the way that the Fellows Riverside Gardens is maintained in its history and its beauty. So to have a facility like Trek join us across from a residential neighborhood and a regional anchor, if not more, was a delight in and of itself. But what happens even more so now is that Trek wants to be a community partner, and they're doing that in some special ways. Again, I'm pointing you to the upper right-hand corner photo. So before Trek arrived, the Fourth Ward Councilman Mike Ray and some community leaders, neighborhood leaders, had been hosting something that they called the Mahoning Fall Fest. And they were doing it somewhat as a Smart Street demonstration and a Better Blocks demonstration, trying to let people know what Mahoning Avenue could look like with some new development, introduce them to some new concepts, let them try them out, and get their reactions to what they experienced and how they felt about that. So to add Trek to the Mahoning Avenue Fall Fest has just been outstanding. But they also are not waiting for the Mahoning Avenue Fall Fest for programming. Those lots that I told you that wrapped around the property earlier, they have turned that. So with EAG and the port's help, all of those lots got leveled out and they are covered in gravel. And so it's now called the Freight Yard. And the Freight Yard is where Trek has outdoor programming of its own. So in the coming months, there's a Lavender and Honey Festival. It would be the second annual Lavender and Honey Festival coming up. They have had, we have a neighborhood association that actually taps trees in a portion of Mill Creek Metro Parks on the west side. And they tap them for sap, and they have their own maple syrup production facility in the park. And that syrup then is sold every spring as a fundraiser that benefits the park district and the neighborhood association, which does its own improvement work throughout the area. And then Trek just dove right into that. They had a maple syrup mania event this past spring at Trek, with the maple syrup producers participating, with the community association participating. Just really wonderful programming coming out of Trek that is bringing community together, celebrating what we have, and hopefully whetting the appetite of people who want to see more, because there are plenty more opportunities on Mahoning to attract investment, attract business, and create an even more robust lifestyle in the corridor. Lower left corner, the wonderful mural that's on the that would be the west side of the Trek building. EAG matched up some Youngstown State University art students with the owner of Trek, Levi Binsley Smith, to have that be a signature part of the actual Trek Coffee House itself. The other building was being used for some production and is now being used more as warehouse space, still essential to Trek. And actually, there's space for someone other than Trek to use the warehouse building itself next door. So there's a lot more activity in this area of Mahoning County, or Mahoning Avenue, excuse me, because of Trek. And then the larger photo shows you what's happening regularly inside Trek. It is open, I believe, 6 days a week. It is the place where people will go to congregate, of course, meet a friend, have conversation. It is the place where people go for yoga. It is a place where people go to learn or to perfect the craft of knitting. So many great things are happening in Trek. There is a vibrancy there that I really, really love and respect and want to see grow along Mahoning Avenue. I myself am not a coffee drinker, but I do visit all of the coffee shops that we have around here. Trek has the best tea selection. I'm telling you that right now. And that is not all that we have to talk about. I think I've got a couple minutes left to tell you about some of the other ways that Mahoning County Land Bank and the Port Authority and the Economic Action Group engage one another. You can see pictures of people painting there on the left. So we have a piece of property in the land bank's inventory at Mahoning Avenue with the cross street Portland Avenue. And there used to be a business there, and the business was torn down. There was still some good concrete pad there though, and so we've done some greening and cleaning at that piece of property, and thanks to EAG, took it to a new level. We had installed a great big concrete planter there so that we could brighten up Mahoning Avenue a little bit. You see it in that smaller far left corner. It was all gray. That was not the original plan, except that the graffiti artists kept hitting us. So we painted over gray and they would do their thing again. So along comes EAG, again, engaging YSU art students to say, what can you do that's fun and vibrant and colorful, and also would discourage graffiti. And so they did a mural on that plot, and it is a wonderful addition, something that you can't help but notice as you're driving Mahoning Avenue, and I'm really grateful that they did that as well. The other two photos are before and after photos of a property that's further up Mahoning Avenue. It's a bit closer to the Youngstown-Austintown boundary line. And it was operating as as you can see, a bar and billiards, but it had gone vacant. It had been vacant for some time, and it was significantly tax delinquent. And that property did go through tax foreclosure, and it went for lack of any bids in the sheriff's sale here. That created an opportunity for us as a land bank. Ohio land banks anyway have a unique opportunity. When a property does not sell at the sheriff's sale, it defaults to our county auditor. Our county auditor then is supposed to have another auction of the property. And in that auction, the first round would look like the same sheriff's sale of before. And if it didn't sell, then in the second round, they would do inverse bidding instead. But a land bank like mine can circumvent that and ask for ownership of the property before the auditor's sale is held. This is where a conversation began anew with the Port Authority and EAG, because those entities saw some promise in that building as well. And that's why they were investing in Mahoning Avenue. They wanted to hand off buildings in better conditions and invite people to come in to use them and take them to higher levels. So the bottom photo shows you what the front exterior looked like after renovation. And what we have now are two approximately 1,000 square foot apartments on the upper level. Both of those currently are rented. And on the bottom level, there is retail space available for lease through the Port Authority. They have engaged the services of a real estate, I should say a realtor, to show that. And they are getting showings, and there are some expressions of interest in using that as retail space. So this is a collaboration that from the beginning has had some success. We have many more challenges along Mahoning Avenue, and we like to look at those as opportunities and continue to work on those, and are very pleased with the direction in which things are heading. I guess I'll leave it on that slide. We also have one other engagement between Mahoning County Land Bank and EAG, and that is that in recent years, EAG, again, wanting to lift up conditions along the Mahoning Avenue corridor, started to partner with a nonprofit in town called Flying High. Flying High, among other things, provides job training for returning citizens. And so they started a maintenance company, and EAG started to work with Flying High to put the maintenance company to work in maintaining Mahoning Avenue to a standard that we find very appealing. So that's grass cutting and litter collection and other beautification. And then a couple years ago, Mahoning County Land Bank said, well, you know what, we're one of those property owners on Mahoning Avenue, and we think that there should be one standard for maintaining Mahoning Avenue, not several. Why don't we pay you to employ Flying High in the care of some of our properties in this vicinity? And that's what we're doing right now. One of the things that we try to do, I'm involved in some other corridor work in the city, and I think one of the principles of corridor work is that you want, I don't want to say a uniform look, but you want a cohesive look to a corridor. And that's why we decided if we were going to continue to build the Mahoning Avenue corridor, we were going to entrust someone else in the maintenance of it in a way that added to that cohesiveness. And so that is how we've been doing it here. I might be ending a few minutes earlier than expected, but that does allow time for some questions. And I want to say thank you very much to the Center for Community Progress for extending this opportunity to me. Thank you to Christina and Brian Julia and Kyra, who are on the call today. I especially want to say thank you to Kim Graziani. She is the person who wrote the story about Trek Coffee House for a recent publication that was released by the Center for Community Progress. Kim and I met 15 years ago when we were travelers on the same study tour in Europe. We became very fast friends, and we have maintained contact all along. Kim has been associated with the Center for Community Progress for a long time. I think is both an employee and now a consultant. And I adore Kim Graziani, and I want to thank her for calling attention to this project of ours, and then what led to this presentation today. So again, to Christina, Brian, Julia, and Kyra, thank you so very much for inviting me to do this.
I apologize. I was muted. Deb, so I wanted to say, first and foremost, thank you. Thank you for sharing with us and taking the time to share your story. Of course, we're really excited to have heard more about the ins and outs and the nuances of how land banks are supporting commercial development. But really want to thank you for taking that extra time to share the vibrancy of Youngstown. And I think that is why we're all engaged in this work, because we love the communities we're a part of. We love great communities that have character and personality, and that makes it feel like home and make people excited. So Deb, thank you for sharing that, but also thank you for the work that you have done. So I'm going to start pulling a few questions from the chat. Just a reminder from the Q&A, just a reminder, if you have a question, please place it in the Q&A. I may be grouping some of them together or organizing them. If you have any questions, please put it in the Q&A, and when we respond, if there's some additional feedback or something, please put it back in the Q&A so we can go there. So I'm going to start with the first question, which really gets into the acquisition process and what went through that. And so the question is, it says, can you briefly go into the process of how you were able to acquire this property? And I believe this was during the Trek Coffee House portion of the conversation. How are you able to acquire this property with both a mortgage and a tax lien, where tax is not escrowed with the mortgage? How did that work? And I think in that answer, Deb, you may talk a little bit about the tools and how the land bank works.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful, because on my end, it said I should be able to be heard. Good, thank you. So, we certainly relied on negotiation in the acquisition of that property. And so ultimately, we were able to reach the lender. The lender was someone who was familiar in Youngstown and really in Ohio and Pennsylvania. And so we were able to talk to the lender about the prospect of letting go of that mortgage. The mortgage, the note was significantly aged. It wasn't for well, it was a significant amount of money. It's not like they weren't letting go of nothing, right? But I think they were sold on the idea of rejuvenation, that we were going to make sure that something good came of this old piece of paper that they probably knew they weren't going to collect on anyway, right? So negotiation was key to that. And there were some key people in those negotiations who talk regularly and who were able to come to the conclusion that the mortgage would be released without any expectation as long as it happened after the owner released ownership of the property to the City of Youngstown Land Bank. So that was the condition, right? We did not want them to get the benefit of the lien release. There had to be an order to when things happened, and it had to be completed, or else the bank was not going to let go of its note. So there's that part of it. In Ohio, we have the ability in certain situations to ask. And by the way, our property taxes are collected at the county level in Ohio on behalf of municipalities. I know that our system differs than those of some of the people on this call, but that's the way it is here. So we have the ability to petition for delinquent taxes to be removed in some circumstances where we feel that perhaps it's not going to happen, or having the property for revitalization just matters so much that everybody comes to a consensus that it's okay to go with a fresh start, right? And so I believe that tool was exercised here. We petitioned for the tax bill to be forgiven, again, upon the transfer of the property from the owner to the city of Youngstown Land Bank in this case. So at least we had the leverage of position there to say, none of these things, you're not walking away without having any debt unless you turn this property over. That was really key to making this happen. And then using the other tools that at least in Ohio are available, right? I mean, could we and should we have tried to wring some money out of this individual? Well, we could, but I think the writing was on the wall there that that wasn't going to happen. And so the next best thing was, let's at least get control of the property and let's start over. I think you see from the pictures that the reset button was pressed very hard and things turned out pretty well. A lot of people are wrapping their arms around Trek right now the way that we have wrapped our arms around Trek. So.
So, and in that answer, Deb, you got to some of the pieces already of one of the next questions that in the chat that Bambi asked, which was about that process of releasing. And so I'll give a quick kind of oversight when they're speaking about, generally speaking, what Deb is speaking on here today and what this entire conversation is about how land banks are able to engage in this work uniquely because of special powers they're given through state legislation. It varies depending on the community that you're in. So the context that she's giving today is specifically about Ohio. If you have more general questions about what a land bank is and how they work, we have resources available at the Center for Community Progress that can give you a much more broad oversight on kind of how they come to be and what the legislation provides. But can you get a little bit into the second half of the question of when an individual is partnering, whether it's an existing commercial business or an owner or whatever, when they're looking to partner with the land bank and there's a transfer going, what's their responsibility after they've transferred that? If they had a debt before, if they had a lien, if they had other things and they're working with the land bank, when they end this process, what are they responsible for? What does that look like moving forward as that private owner that's looking to partner?
Sure. I mean, the bottom line always is everybody wants free and clear title. If somebody's going to invest in property, they do not want to take along the baggage of the former owner's bills, right? And then the question becomes, well, how do we get there? How do we reach that point? There are some property owners who, I mean, we generally leave what I described with Trek as kind of the last resort. It would be preferable to collect upon delinquent taxes. It would be preferable for people to reach settlements on outstanding mortgages or other notes or things of that nature. And we definitely do have those conversations because I feel that's important. I think we all feel that that is important. But how you get there sometimes does mean having to use all of the tools that are available. And so if it becomes clear that, a business ended on a really bad note and there just isn't anything there for them to satisfy some of these outstanding obligations, then we turn to those other tools. Those tools are used, they need to be used very judiciously because, Ohio as an example, 2/3 of every dollar that's paid in for real estate taxes are going to the school district here. It is the way that we have financed education in Ohio for decades. It actually was ruled unconstitutional a long time ago, and we are still struggling for the solution to that. But in my mind, knowing that 67 cents on average of every dollar of delinquent tax represents something that's owed to a school district, this is not a tool of trying to wave a magic wand away, taxes away. It's not a tool that I use a lot. It's one that I use really judiciously. So yes, there are conversations and negotiations and all sorts of things around, well, what can you do? Because we don't even talk about the last resort until we have to. We still look for some personal responsibility out of those owners because the person who's following them doesn't want to deal with all of that, right? You can't attract development when development isn't going into the future if it has to go into the past to make up for something. It's certainly not going to work here. I don't know if it works where you are, but it's not going to work here. So very, very conscious of that tool and what it means for everybody involved, used sparingly.
So really quick, related to this piece about what the process looks like when land banks receive property, and again for the ultimate creation of clear title. Has the conversation around heirs properties issues been relevant at the land bank stage of the conversation, or is that more upstream? One of the questions here is, do you ever encounter heirs properties issues at the land bank level where the title to the real property has fractured ownership?
Yes, we do. And last year, I was brought into a conversation by our Mahoning County probate judge, a city council woman, an attorney affiliated with our legal aid society, and we started to talk about needing to really drill down on these situations. We have dealt with some of them at the land bank. They are complex. There are things that I don't necessarily know about the ins and outs of probate court that I am learning now as a result of this conversation, because we do have an heir property program emerging here so that we put more emphasis on these situations. By the estimation of our probate judge here, there are hundreds of instances of heir properties or tangled titles, depending on what you're familiar with. There are hundreds of instances here in Mahoning County, and they deserve our attention. And so we have this working group, and we are expanding the working group, have brought in some other people to include ambassadors, so to speak, from some of the communities where we know there's a concentration of tangled titles, so that we have community members in the community who they may get wind of somebody being in one of those situations and can say, I know where to point you to. Let's see if we can get this problem resolved. So yes, it is a thing here. Is it officially a thing? And we want to do something about it.
That's wonderful to hear. And yeah, that's definitely something that we've heard about across the country, and constantly, specifically about the negative impact it has on families moving down the line. And so the ability to be able to be a part of the solution and part of the conversation, we really applaud that. So switching gears a little bit as we go into the last few questions. So we've talked a lot about, in your presentation, the conversation today, about the process of executing this, whether leveraging the legal tools and accomplishing the end goals and delivering something great to community. Can we talk a little bit about how your land bank partners with community? And so thinking about this from twofold: one piece of from the institutional level, whether it's working with a community land trust or a nonprofit or entities that work on behalf of the community. And then the other piece of avenues for direct involvement, or how do you hear from community voice? And so when we're deciding on whether you're going to do a coffee shop or we want to change it to something different, how are you able to gain an understanding of what the community really wants at the end piece there? So you can talk about both partnering with organizations and then directly hearing from residents themselves.
It's a great question and a really interesting question, because it's happening. You know, I'm working at the county level. I'm not representing a single community. There's actually 23 taxing districts in Mahoning County, right? So it's 23 different areas with kind of their own way of doing things. Youngstown is the county seat. Youngstown is the largest city. Youngstown has a number of offices and employees and can advance things more readily than many other communities here in Mahoning County. And so for that reason, you can see that sort of engagement happening at a higher level in a place like Youngstown. If I say Youngstown Neighborhood Development Corporation, I know some people on this call know who I'm talking about, because they are they're superstars at what they do. So if I'm in Youngstown, then Mahoning County Land Bank and YNDC are frequent partners in many ways in the development of affordable housing right now, in the cleanup of areas, the cleaning and greening of areas, right? And so YNDC brings to the table its own ability to work with the community and know that they have the voice of community in their heads as programs are being developed. And so having YNDC as a partner like that helps me to have more confidence that if we're going to start a project, that we know that there's some awareness about what's happening, right? Because they have baked that sort of neighborhood advocacy into what they do. Just east of Youngstown is a city, and it's pronounced Camel. It is spelled like the Campbell soup can, Campbell, but the people there actually pronounce it Camel. So, and it's a great little community, and it also suffered with the loss of steel manufacturing because the Camel Works was huge over there, employing a lot of people. And so it has had its ups and downs also, but it's a tight-knit community. Not the same type of people power in their city hall, right? In numbers, right? I'm not talking about intellect or desire, I'm talking about numbers. Not the same people power. So we tend to find ourselves helping them in some situations in making sure that, you know, the people's voices are heard as we're doing things. And it's a little easier in Camel also because since it's a community of less than 10,000 people, you know, you get people to show up at a city hall meeting and it can become a forum for discussions, right? And we've had some public forums in Camel also around some of the things that we've done there. So we step it up a little bit more in a community like Camel to make sure that there is some form of public engagement and keeping that public awareness up also. So it just depends on where we are from day to day. Who needs us?
All right. So I've got one more that was getting into some of the specifics of what they saw on one of the slides there. So I'm not sure I fully understand it, but I'm going to read it the way it is and maybe it'll come through there. It was saying on one of your slides up, there was a sign. They saw a portion of the sign that looks like it said freight yard. Was some work done near the freight yard? Is that a part of the development project that we shared?
Yes.
Right there.
Yes. The freight yard became the outdoor venue for Trex programming. And so there's a big shipping container in the back, and in big block letters, they sprayed paint on it, the freight yard. So outdoor concerts are held there, other outdoor activities. But yes, so if you see the freight yard associated with an activity, it means they intend for it to be an outdoor event. And if it's not outdoors, then it's just a trek event, right? But yes, they've put that outdoor use to space, and it's fun. It's a fun place to be, especially when they have live music. I love that.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I see that Julia is joining us, and I'll pass it along to her. But Deb, I just want to say from the National Land Bank Network and Center for Community Progress, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. Oh, I froze on my computer. I hope I didn't freeze on your computer.
You're okay.
Okay, great.
Good to go.
Thanks to everyone for joining today. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, Deb. Thank you for the great moderating, Brian. We just dropped a link in the chat to a short survey for you to tell us about your experience. So please fill that out. We will be sending out our recording and the presentation slides within the week. So keep an eye out for that. Thanks so much, everyone.